Shabbat shalom, everyone. So for those of you online, Dory has a text sheet to share with you. For those of you who are here in person, there were pink text sheets sitting outside on the door for you. Now, this is going to be it should be A, educational, but B, a little bit humorous because we are in Shabbat Hanukkah. So I recently found this text that immediately I wanted to share with all of you, and this is the perfect Shabbat for it. It was in fact written for the Shabbat of Hanukkah. So in Jewish tradition, we have lots of different texts that are commentaries on commentaries. So our original text, we have Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, right? And then we have all of these questions that we're left with. Like it says, keep Shabbat. What does it mean to keep Shabbat? What does it mean to guard Shabbat? There's actually 2 commandments. One that says, Shamor et HaShabbat, guard the Sabbath, and one that says, Zachor et Shabbat, keep the Sabbath. So then we have all of these commentaries throughout the centuries that help us to decipher and distinguish what it means that the Torah is saying. So it's giving us commandments. So then we have the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is the rabbi's commentary on the Torah. The problem is that the Mishnah still doesn't answer a lot of questions. So then the commentary on the Mishnah is the Talmud. It's called the Gemara. So it has in the Talmud, you have a Mishnah, and then you have a rabbinic discussion around it. That's called the Gemara, and it has debates which go in lots of different directions, okay? And then, by the way, that's not the end. There's still a lot of questions after that. So then we have all of the different codes, which is where you get things like the Mishnah Torah from Maimonides that says, okay, but how am I supposed to actually do this? Because there's more questions and debates than answers in the Talmud. However, I want to teach a little bit about the Talmud tonight. So in an effort to do that, because the Talmud is really complex and we study it in lots of different times, particularly in adult education classes, there are a group of rabbis that are referenced here and people that know about Talmud that came together that wrote what they call Masechet chopsticks, okay? Masechet means tractate, so the tractate of chopsticks. This tractate, just to be clear, this is not real, it is a tractate of Talmud. It's a satire, okay? So it's a parody, it's supposed to help us understand what it is to have Talmud in our lives, and it's really interesting. And the way they wrote it is to help answer questions about one of the most important Jewish traditions there is, which is on December 24th and 25th that the rest of the Christian world around us, which is much of American culture, what do Jewish people do when most of the stores and things are closed? There are 2 things. Does anybody know the 2 things that are stereotypically what Jewish people do on Hanukkah? Eat Chinese food. That's right. Number 1, eat Chinese food. Does anybody know the second one? Go to a movie. Okay. So this is not Masechet cinema, although I do think that exists as well, probably somewhere. This is Masechet chopsticks, and it is meant to answer all of the myriad of questions that you might have about what is the halakha, what is the way to eat Chinese food on Christmas. So in the style of Talmudic debate, we have here, and by the way, there's more. I only brought you 2 of the Mishnayot. We're going to go through it together because first of all, it's very funny, and it helps us but it also really does help us to understand what it means to have Talmudic dialogue. So we're going to read it together. So the Mishnah, remember, is the text, and then the Gemara interprets what it means in the text. So here's the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, our rabbis asks, when does one begin the festive meal of chopsticks? Beit Shammai Omrim, the school of Shammai. Remember, we have 2 big schools of thought in Talmudic debate. We have Shammai and we have Hillel. Shammai, just so for reference, is usually the much more strict, very like machmir, as we call it, very strict version of the text. Beit Hillel is oftentimes a little bit more lenient. And oftentimes, spoiler alert, we go with the teaching of Hillel, but both are preserved at all times. So the school of Shammai says, on the 24th day of the month of December, because one should larutz la'asot mitzvah, to run to perform a holy act. So all of the Hebrew that they put in here, much of it is language that you would find in Talmud. So it often says that you should run to perform a mitzvah. You should be eager to do this. You're not supposed to be doing something because you're forced to. You should be excited to perform a mitzvah. La rutz la'asot mitzvah. He said, so you should be doing this on the 24th day of the month. Because remember, in Jewish calendar, it's Erev, right? We start like Friday night, Shabbat, to Saturday. So you should start on Erev, Festival of Chopsticks, right? Because you should have it on the 24th, because you should run to perform the mitzvah. Beit Hillel Omrim, the school of Hillel, says, through the entirety of the night of the 24th and the day of the 25th is mutar, permitted. There's lots of debates in the Talmud that asks whether something is mutar, permitted, or asur, forbidden. This is mutar, okay? Beit Hillel says you can have your meal, the festive meal, anytime between December 24th in the evening all the way through the evening of the 25th. But the mehadrin, those who wish to embellish their observance, the people who are even more eager to do the mitzvah, wait until the final hours of the 25th, because we ma'alin bakodesh velo moridin. We ascend to holiness, we don't descend. Now this specific line here is important, because if you look at our Hanukkah right here, we added light every one of the 3 candles, right? You might remember that a couple of years ago I demonstrated to you that that is actually the teaching of Beit Hillel, that you add lights to the menorah because you increase holiness, you do not decrease holiness. Shammai, on the other hand, says you start with all 8 lights lit, and then you take away light every night. So they brought in the same text here. So why do we wait until the final hours? Because we ma'alin bakodesh velo moridin, we ascend to holiness, right? So we don't detract holiness from the world. V'yesh omrim, and there are those who say to extend the simcha, the joyous occasion. So we should do everything we can to extend the simcha. So that is the Mishnah. So then, by the way, we have many pages. We'll see how far we get. The rest of it is commentary on the 10 lines of Mishnah here, which is so indicative of what Talmud is, right? It's a little brief little snippet of something, and then the rabbis go nuts on it, all right? So this is what happens. So the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, which means our sages taught, in an earlier saying, Amar Rabbi Seshwan. Rabbi Seshwan. I was a man of 70. Now, 70 is an often used phrase in Talmud. There's lots of times when we see, I was a man of 70 when I sat below a carob tree. That's a teaching we see in Talmud. I was a man of 70, and I had always consumed the Feast of Chopsticks before the end of the first watch on the 24th. But once I fell asleep while watching The Sound of Music, and I slept through the entirety of the following day. When I woke on the night of the 25th, my food was still warm. From that day on, I have followed the teaching of Beit Hillel. All right, so this man used to follow the teaching of Beit Shammai, but once he fell asleep and he realized that you could in fact enjoy your food all the next day, and he decided to become a convert to Beit Hillel. And then they ask, because they do this, they ask lots of questions. So the next question is, until when does the festive meal satiate us? How long does this keep us full, we ask? Amar Rav said 1 hour. Amar Shmuel says only 1/2 hour. So it depends. How long does Chinese food keep us full? We're not sure. Somebody says an hour, somebody says 30 minutes. Now, a bigger question. What do we do with the leftovers? This is a big question. Tashma, which they translate here as come and learn from his teaching. Tashma is another very common Talmudic phrase. It's a way to say, come around, gather around, and listen. Because remember, until much later, this was all an oral teaching. People used to memorize all of Talmud, and they were called the Amoraim, and their whole job was to memorize things, and whenever somebody needed a citation, the rabbi would say, hey, come here and give me the teaching on whatever, and they would say it. So then when you want to hear a teaching, you say Tashma. Come and listen. Amar Rav Shimon ha-chacham, which is a mouthful. Ha-chacham means the wise one. Rabbi Shimon, the wise, said, in the name of Rabbi Yaakov, the Tzaddik, the righteous one, we keep them. Shana Amar, as it is written, Shamor, you should keep it. Remember, in which I said Shabbat, like the mitzvah of Shabbat, you Shamor at HaShabbat. They bring in all of these different texts. What do you do with the leftovers? It says you keep them. Shamor, you keep them. Ketzad, how? It is preferable that one should use a small square cardboard containers with wire handles to contain the notar, the remainder. Now, notar is another word. What does the notar usually refer to? The sacrifice. Here we're not talking about the sacrifice. We're saying, what do we do with the leftovers? Very preferable to keep them in the boxes they come in, the small cardboard boxes with the wire little handles. Don't put them in your Tupperware. That's not what they want you to do. And why do you do this? So to prolong the mitzvah, the sacred act of the Feast of Chopsticks. V'tov lehachmir, and it is very good to be strict about this, okay, is what they're saying. I mean, this is, are you getting the kind of idea of how Talmud goes, right? Okay. Now, here's more. Ve'ika da'amri, and there are those who say, al tikra shamor ele smor. Don't read it as shamor, but rather smor. Now, this happens a lot in Talmud. They say, no, that isn't a shin, that's a sin, because it depends on where the dot goes on the shin, right? So maybe this actually isn't the right word at all. Maybe we're not supposed to read shamor. Maybe we're supposed to read smor. Now, this is indicative of a whole different part of Talmud that is so common where, and this isn't even the worst of it, guys, we're going to get there. They go into a totally different direction because they say, oh, we're interpreting this the entirely wrong way because the dot's in the wrong place, so you're wrong. So why would it say that? Say, my nafka minha, what is the practical result of reading that way? Are we expected to eat s'mores on the festival of chopsticks? No. Rather, the creative reading of the verse comes to teach us that we shall eat dessert, shalo totam, that is not the same flavor as the meal, not the same cuisine. So it's saying that we should interpret the verse this way with a sin, not a shin, so as to help us understand what our dessert on the festive meal should be. I wish I was kidding that this kind of conversation didn't happen in Talmud, but it does, friends, it does. Okay. Kamashmalan, that is what it's teaching us. Why? De'en mazale Yisrael, because fortune telling doesn't pertain to the Jewish people. Now, that's an important phrase. There's a whole section of Talmud that talks about the zodiac and the astrological signs and whether or not they apply to Jewish people. So they bring this verse here, De'en mazale Yisrael. We can't use the fortune cookies because we don't believe in fortunes. Tanya, an earlier teaching, is it asur? Not mutar, remember mutar is permitted. Is it asur? Is it forbidden to eat ugot mazal, the cakes of fortune cookies? No, mutar, it is permitted. But one has not sufficiently embellished the mitzvah, the sacred act. Ve'ika de'amri, and there are those who say one has not fulfilled the obligation unless one eats a dessert from another cuisine. So you're supposed to eat on the festive meal, you're supposed to have Chinese food. But you can't just have the fortune cookie, no. You have to eat a different cuisine for dessert. Very important here is what they're saying. So now, this is where we're going to take a whole left turn, okay? Which, in case you didn't think that was the left turn of this teaching, this is the left turn. All right. Vitanya, another earlier teaching, is it asur? Is it forbidden to eat ugot mazal, cakes of fortune telling? Because if it says that ein mazal Yisrael, if the fortune cookies don't apply to Israel, is it therefore, can we eat them, or is it forbidden? So here's what it says. No, mutar, it is permitted. Divrei hachamim, these are the words of the sages. Va'amar Rabbi Mordechai, but Rabbi Mordechai says asur. Some say permitted, Rabbi Mordechai says asur. Kavar lanu chag le'echol pat haba'a bekisnin. It is forbidden. Why? Because we already have a holiday for eating cake-like items with filling. Does anybody know what holiday we're referring to? Yeah. Not your birthday, but very close. Do you eat cake with filling on your birthday? It's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah, think of a Jewish holiday, though. Triangle cookies. Not Sukkot. Purim, you got it. Good job. So we eat, it's saying we already have a holiday where we eat cake-like pastries with filling in them. And then it says, and then he said to me, so then it brings in what's really interesting, this random verse from Ezekiel, which happens in Talmud all the time. So in order to tell them that it is forbidden, it says, Amru, they said to him, we already eat that. No one eats the filling of the ugot mazal. They're saying, okay, so you're saying it's forbidden because we already have a cake-like item. And they're saying nobody eats the filling of the ugot mazal. Nobody eats the filling of the fortune cookie. You don't eat the paper that comes in the fortune cookie. That would be silly. And then it says, Chazar lahem, he replied to him, kakatuv, it is written. And then it says, I'm going to just translate. It says, "O human, eat this Megillah scroll that I'm giving you and fill your stomach with it." So I ate it, and it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. They're quoting Ezekiel, because why not, right? And so it's going on to say that only a prophet can eat a scroll. So he's bringing in all of these different teachings. They're bringing in all these different teachings that help us understand where and why Talmud goes in such different directions. And then in the following paragraph, it goes back to the original, and it says, Pligiba, there was a difference of opinion about the original question. Titania. So then it goes back to leftovers again, because we already had that 3 paragraphs ago. It went on this left turn, roundabout side route over there, but it says, wait, we haven't even gotten to the original question. Come back to the leftovers. So it goes on and on like that. I'm going to encourage you can keep reading on your own. It's very funny. But it really does teach us what it means to read Talmud. It's never linear. It doesn't just say, what is it? Here are all the rules that are going to happen. That's why we end up needing Maimonides. And we need all of the codes that come later. We need the Shulchan Aruch. We need all of these things, because at the end of the day, do you know what you're supposed to do? Because I don't. It has a million different things. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my leftovers. Am I permitted to eat the fortune cookie? There's one rabbi that says yes, one rabbi that says no. One says I should eat something different for a cuisine, or I have not fulfilled my mitzvah if I don't eat a different dessert with my Chinese food than a fortune cookie. This is what it means to study Talmud. And this is just a funny example that we can all relate to, but Talmudic examples really go in so many different directions. You might start out with, hey, I wonder if it's kosher to eat chicken and cheese. Real Mishnah here, right? It says, is chicken kosher? Doesn't actually usually answer that question. The answer at the end of the day is, it's actually not meat, but it looks like meat. So we're going to not have cheese with it, because people might get confused that it looks like it. So then it goes on from there. And they have all of these debates about, well, what if this and what if that? And this text over here proves this in Jeremiah, and all of these different things. So we now understand that Talmud is meant in some ways to just be a record of the many, many debates that rabbis sat around having. It's our holy text, of course, not this Masechet, but others. But it's really interesting and funny, and the way that the rabbis and the scholars who wrote this are really help us understand a little bit more. And it's a fun teaching for the Shabbat of Hanukkah. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.